Thank you for joining me on Pastor to Pastor Day, and I have with me Reverend Joey Canady from Hampstead Baptist Church in Hampstead, North Carolina. And Joey is also a member or on our board of directors as a member. And I appreciate you being with me today, Joey.
Oh, it's my privilege, always.
As we get started today, I told you we were just going to have a conversation. We talk around some different things. We'll just see where it goes. But as we begin, I wanted to ask your opinion as a member of the board of directors. What are your thoughts concerning the ministry of Christ-Centered Solutions as a biblical counseling ministry?
Oh, wow. Well, first off, I'm just so grateful for it because it is such a needed thing within our churches and our pastors as well. Within our churches, because I think in our day, probably more than at any time in history, from my perspective, biblical counseling is such a great need. And you couple that with so many, I think I'm right on this, so many pastors who don't feel competent in counseling for whatever reason. So there's such a need for a good Christ-centered, biblically sound counseling. And that's what you are. And man, I'm excited about it and on board. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that. We've known each other. I was thinking before we started today, we've known each other for almost 20 years now, right?
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, look at us. We look so young.
Yeah, sure.
we look young, but our bodies don't feel young.
Absolutely.
But you and I have worked together during those years as pastors. We've in each other's pulpits, and you've also from time to time sent people to me for counseling. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if you would speak to kind of that process and why you sent people my way.
Okay. That's got some different angles as well from my pastoral perspective. I love counseling. I love working one-on-one with people that are having issues, and I love to open the Bible and allow Scripture to speak to those issues. But there are some things that I run across that I'm not, I suppose I could say equipped for from one perspective, and I feel more comfortable with somebody who is equipped or more equipped than I am in that area. Time is also an issue. You pastor a church. I don't pastor a large church. It's probably very average size, but it may be easier in a large church because you have more people to do these things and even counselors on staff, but we don't have that. So I do all I can, but it gets overwhelming. And there's times I just feel very compelled to send them to somebody that is competent and I can trust. So it's two of those things. It's an issue of equipping and even a time issue.
Yeah, that's I think that's what a lot of pastors have said to me in the past. It's one is the time issue, because I know from just the training that we've had in college and seminary. Usually the idea is that if someone comes to a pastor for counseling, you try to keep those sessions at a minimum 5, less than 10.
Right.
And then if it takes more than that, you try to find someone that can can take up that issue with someone.
Absolutely.
With them.
Yeah.
Because even though we make jokes about it, and other people make jokes about pastors and only working one day a week and a half day on Wednesday,
Right.
really not the truth.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that is, I think, the major issue, that there's so much to do, especially in our day with the internet and social media, and everybody's looking at other ministries and comparing, I mean, like it or not, and just your regular things, your normal things that you have to do, such as preparing messages. I mean, a pastor really, as you well know, could spend all his time in doing that and nothing else.
True.
Things are that important. So you really could spend much time in it. I think as you get older and been in preparing for many years, those things, in a sense, get easier. So you learn how to manage your time better there, but there's still so much more to do. And that's not even counting visioning, if you want to use that word, which takes a ton of time as well. And in a more traditional church setting, like I'm in, you have a lot of other things that you have to do. Teams, working with teams, training teams, pastoral ministry and visitation and all of that. So your time is just, you really don't have any. So you have to spread it out properly the best you can. And there are many times when it comes to counseling, which is at a priority as far as I'm concerned, because I mean, we're in ministry, and ministry is the people, and your best interest is in them for God's glory. And you want to spend the time necessary with them, with those people. So you want to care for them and take care of them. And sometimes having a resource like yours is absolutely priceless.
Yeah. Well, Jay Adams would talk about through his nouthetic counseling, which is biblical counseling. He talked about how all Christians really should be equipped
Mm-hmm.
to some degree to help counsel one another. And that's one of the things with Christ-centered solutions that I really want to focus on, is that is helping pastors by training some of their people, some of their to help take some of the pressures off. Because I think studies have shown that you don't have to have a degree at the end of your name in order to listen to a brother or sister in Christ.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
And sometimes really that's all that's needed, is someone that can sit and listen so that a brother or sister can be heard.
Right.
Just need to get some of that out.
That is so true.
And so that's a big part of the ministry. So let me ask you, Joey, if you were going to share CCS, Christ-Centered Solutions, with another pastor in a 30-second commercial, what do you think you might say to him?
Well, I would say that we all have this great need for help in counseling for whatever reason. Obviously, those I listed, equipping issue and the time issue, but also the trust issue. That's huge for me. I'm extremely cautious with my people. They're my people. They're my sheep that I'm responsible for, and I've been assigned to care for them. So I am extremely cautious of who, if I send them to someone, of who I send them to. And the list goes way down before I begin to see people that I trust, just to be frank with you. And you all are absolutely at the top of that list. That goes a long way. To me, that means...
You broke up just a little bit. To you, that means what?
To me, the trust issue is as important as anything.
Yeah. I think that it really is important. Jimmy Fuller, one of our other board members, he and I had this kind of conversation last week. And he was saying the same thing about trust. Um, and we want to make sure as pastors that we're sending people uh, to someone that is not going to undo everything that we've tried to invest in them from a scriptural standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's also important. I like what you said about people being entrusted. These are the people that are entrusted to you. They're entrusted to us by God.
That's right. Yeah.
Shepherds of their souls.
Yeah. And that is a weighty, weighty matter, overwhelming even at times. And there are multiple, in the area that I live, there are multiple places that I could send them. But with some of them, questions arise. Some of them are blatant, and I simply would not send anyone. Others, possibly, maybe depending on what the issue was, but there's still red flags. So I know where you are. I know that the Bible is your foundation, your the pillars that hold everything up in the organization. So I can trust that, and I don't think twice about sending someone your way.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I love the word. It is authoritative for life and everything that we do, and I appreciate you recognizing that. And I do think that is clearly what makes biblical counseling different than secular counseling. As I had a conversation with Jimmy, we all operate from a worldview, and the question is, which worldview, right?
Correct.
Is it a biblical worldview, or is it some sort of worldview rooted in some other secular philosophy or some other belief that is contrary to the scriptures? And I think it's important that we operate, that we bring everything back to the Word.
Absolutely. Yes.
I appreciate you feeling that way and sharing that, why you trust me. All right. You want to switch gears for a second?
Okay.
All right. I'm not sure who's watching these videos, but I think it's important that they know the church that you're in was hit hard by the hurricane. I forget the name of the hurricane now. That
Florence. I could never forget
it. Yeah, and you guys were out of your sanctuary for how long?
14 months.
14 months. And so that created a bit of stress for you and your congregation, didn't it?
It did. It did. In some ways, certainly.
But there were some other ways, I bet, that it was also a blessing. Is that right?
No question. If you're going to weigh it out, there were a lot more blessings than stress. I mean, it was tiring, especially in the first few months, especially in the first couple of weeks, because my folks were gone. I mean, they got out of here. We were expecting a Category 4 hurricane to hit. Folks around here can, endure up to a 3, and then beyond that, they head for the hills pretty much, because they know what these things can do. So they were expecting that, so they left, and I was one of the handful that was left here. I had just moved, and so I was real close to the church, 30 seconds, a minute away. So I was able to come back and forth, and you can see God's hand in all of this, and how He put the pieces in place and prepared us for this. And so right down to a couple years before, the church had extended the fellowship hall. If they had not done that, there's nowhere else in this town that we could have met. So we went straight. We didn't miss a week. Well, we did miss one Sunday, but the week after that, we were back in the fellowship hall. much closer than we've ever been. People joined that year, even when we were displaced. God sent us people to restore the building. We just took our minds off of that and continued ministry. It was honestly, I mean, you hear people say this, but I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Your people grew during that time.
No question. Yeah.
Do you think it helped prepare them for times like now with COVID-19?
It has. And I've mentioned that to my folks multiple times now. I know he's used it to prepare me. I mentioned earlier to you that from the time I've been here, we've had a major disaster and now a worldwide pandemic. So I feel like a wartime pastor in a sense, but it has prepared our people. I mean, I've been pretty amazed at them, at how they how they did during the hurricane and the recovery time, but how they're dealing with this COVID-19 thing. They're just doing their thing and continuing to minister and support and give, and it's impressive to me.
Yeah. And the response of the church, it really has been impressive overall. And I know there have been a couple of large churches in Florida and maybe some other places that have kind of bucked the system and the guidelines. But you guys there in Hampstead, which is right outside of Wilmington, if anyone didn't know, you're following the guidelines, correct?
We are. We don't like it as far as not being able to meet, because boy, these are some fellowshipping folks here. They love each other, and so we desperately miss that. But Scripture tells us to obey the law of the land. Of course, that is as long as it's not anti Christ, anti-Christian stuff, of course. So we've tried to do that, and we want to be a good example, and we don't want to put our folks in harm's way, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to realize too. The world, the lost, need to realize that we are not, as Christians, anti-people.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We love people. God has called us to love people and to minister to them. And I say that because I read an article this morning from American Family, how that Franklin Graham's group, Samaritan Purse, is kind of being ridiculed and looked down on with the temporary hospitals they've set up in New York and Central Park, and with the mayor there. And I think there's a tremendous misunderstanding,
Right.
And I'm not so sure that it's not spiritually an attack on
Right.
church.
Right.
And so we do want to do all that we can to minister to people, but we want to do it in the right way too.
Correct. Absolutely.
And so with that, let me ask this. Do you see in your people some areas where they're kind of getting, I don't know, cabin fever? They're kind of fretting a little bit. And if they are, how are you guys there in Hampstead helping them?
Yeah, I do. I mean, as I mentioned, I've been impressed with them during this because they've been very diligent and vigilant, even in staying connected with us from their side. I mean, we do all we can, which I'll talk about in a moment, but we're limited. At some point, it's up to our folks to respond and do their best to stay connected to us as well. And I've seen that. I get pictures on social media of our folks with their phones, cast to the TV, watching us and taking notes. And that's super encouraging to a shepherd.
Mm.
But I do sense a little bit of frustration, I think, on their part more than anything. And just wanting to get back together. That's what I'm picking up on. They're able to get out and go to get groceries or exercise a little bit, but they want to get back together. And I'm picking up on a little bit of that. So the way we've tried to deal with that is, I think, in a large part, how most guys are doing it. Obviously, live streaming their services. And it's not merely a live stream. I try to say things like I would from the pulpit to them if they were in my presence. Try to connect with them the best I can. I'm having to learn how to look at a camera and preach, because I'm one who, I love to read my people when I'm preaching and look in their eyes. And I can tell when they're fidgety. I can tell when I've lost them. I can't tell that when I'm preaching to a camera. So I'm learning that, and I'm also doing some live feeds. We have a public Facebook page and Instagram. So I do some stuff on there, but we have a private Facebook page where we share prayer times and other things that we don't deem necessary to put out in public. And I'm on there, not every day, but almost every day, either typing something or especially a video, just a live video, so they can talk back to me. And a large portion of that is me just encouraging them to stay faithful. Do these things, stay faithful, hang in there, use it. This is God ordained in one way or the other. So use it for his glory and our good. I wrote a letter, a physical snail mail letter this past week, telling them how much I miss them, and a spiritual inventory for this time. Just 6 questions that I think they could ask themselves just to help get them through this time. So I'm just trying to every angle I can think of to keep in touch with them.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Joy, because they do need to hear from us, and
Yeah.
They want to know what we're thinking. I mean, that's really when we stand in the pulpit or when we're teaching online from our office, like where we're sitting today, each of us, they want to hear what their shepherd has to say from the Word of God. And so I think that's really good that you're doing all those things to encourage them. Hey, as we begin to close, and again, I really appreciate your time. These might not be short answers, but I'm curious, looking forward. Well, first, as a pastor, other than this COVID-19, what do you think some of our biggest challenges are today as the church and as pastors?
I think a lot of it has to do with what type of church you pastor. One of my biggest challenges is helping our people, we don't have a lot of younger people. It's 30 and above. We have some younger than that, but that's the bulk of our folks. And trying to get them to understand that things have changed, and that there's a different mindset in churches. That's been my biggest struggle. And, how do we take what you're used to, church polity, all of that kind of thing, and saying, here's where we are, and here's how our culture looks at that and deals with it, and how do we go from here? That's been my biggest issue. And I think also getting our folks to understand the gravity of things, just life itself, where we may be in God's timetable, which we ultimately don't know that, but in just keeping them focused on the Word. I mean, those are pretty practical things, but really those are the things that I deal with probably more than anything.
Okay. I, I, I smile when you bring up eschatology and things, because some we have in the past had some interesting conversations.
Yeah, we have.
And so, what about the future? What do you think? Are, are these same issues kind of the big issues moving into the future?
Well, in a sense, they are. I know, again, with my people, I think, again, I'm not a prophet, um, but you can set back and see how things could develop in our country. And I could easily see a day in which this is how we do church, that we do church like the early church again from home because of government mandates or persecution or any of those things. So I'm trying to prepare my folks for such a time as that. And I think that could happen. I mean, this may be just a glimpse into it for them to understand that church is not, this committee or that committee, but it's just living life together, um, glorifying God in our daily lives, that type of mentality, an early church mentality that I think we got away from in the contemporary American church.
I think that's interesting also that you mentioned that, because this really could be kind of a test run.
Yeah.
Back, I don't know, it's probably been 15 years ago. George Barna and Frank Viola put out a book, Pagan Christianity, and talked
Mm-hmm.
going back to taking church back to the home. And
Right.
I think you're right. We may be heading that way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, of course, and like I said, I have no um, direct insight of that, obviously, but I could sure see it happening.
Yeah, I could too, and it um, as we were talking before we started recording, we're in our mid 50s. We're still we still got a few miles left on us, but
Yeah.
we could see some of these. Yeah, me too. We could see some of that in our
Good.
life for sure. Okay. One last question. You're in a Southern Baptist church, and I am too. We've served Southern Baptist churches for a long time, and there's some changes afoot. It looks like in the SBC too. Any
Right.
thoughts about what's taking place in Nashville?
Oh boy. Rod, this is such a I don't know. I've kept up with it. I've got opinions about this and that. I think the thing that bothers me more than anything about some of the different directions are the factions, and they're factions that they're not so much. I don't think they're so much a biblical thing as they were at one time in our convention that caused division. I think it's more. I mean, it all comes back to scripture, but I think it's in how we handle it. I've seen some people not, it's easy to get behind a keyboard and say some things.
Yeah.
When you talk to someone face to face and communicate with them, you tend to act differently and understand better. And I think we see with the onset of the internet, a lot of division that's taken place and camps being made, and that has bothered me a lot. As far as the future of our convention, I think it will remain and probably remain strong, but I think it's going to look a lot different probably than it has in the past.
Yeah, I think some of those I don't know, cosmetic changes. I think they're already taking place.
Right, right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Something we really I don't think the average SBC member in the pew
Right,
sees it or understands it.
right,
It
right.
hasn't trickled down to them yet,
Correct.
but I think it could.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've noticed that folks aren't as privy to convention understanding as there were even a generation ago anyhow.
Yeah, I agree. And for those that aren't aware, some of the things we're talking about really are taking place. And you're right, there are these different groups that are forming, but in the what is it, the ERLC? What?
Right.
Yeah, and with Russell Moore and some different ways of viewing things. So we'll see. Talking
Yeah.
race,
Yeah.
intersectionality is
Right.
right. And we're talking about complementarianism and egalitarianism, and those type of things. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
It will. And, I probably shouldn't even mention this, but um, as much as God has used, I think, and I genuinely mean that, as much as he has used the Southern Baptist Convention in phenomenal ways since our beginnings, he doesn't need us to accomplish his will,
Never has.
That's correct. And you know what? I hope he doesn't have to show us that.
Yeah.
In this kind of strange day that we're in right now, I told my folks recently that look, when we come back, you're going to see that this committee or that committee are not the main things, and we can survive without those things. And you put so much emphasis on those things that you lose sight of the big picture. And I think that's true with the convention as well, that if we're not careful, we will miss the forest for the trees kind of thing. So I hope God continues to use it and bless it, but we shall see in days to come.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Hey man, thanks a lot. I appreciate you so much. And normally I don't tell people enough how much I appreciate them. And but I love you. I love what you've done in ministry, and I just so appreciate you partnering with me all these years.
Oh, absolutely, my privilege, Rod. And you're a great friend, and really, your ministry has just always been phenomenal. But especially now, God's hand is obviously on you, and I'm just glad to be part of it. So thanks.
Thank you, Joey. You guys take care, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.